NEL Isagi might get a rework sooner than we think. So today I want to talk about something very fresh that just dropped in the official Discord. A new poll about who needs a rework the most. As you might expect, this is really exciting because the results could shape the next big updates in Blue Lock Rivals. The poll is still technically open, so we don't have final numbers yet, but from what we can see and how things are trending, one character seems to have a clear lead. NEL Isagi. Yeah, the same NEL Isagi we've been talking about in past videos. So let's break this down. The poll asked the community which styles they think need a rework the most. There were several interesting options. Of course, NEL Isagi was one of them. Then we had Aiku, who was already reworked, but devs still included him because apparently some players weren't satisfied with his current rework. We also had Kunigami, Hiyori, Don Lorenzo, and Karasu on the list. But as we already know, Karasu's rework is confirmed and in the works, so we can kind of skip him from this discussion. Now let's focus on NEL Isagi. As many of you already know, apparently the devs were planning to downgrade him from World Class to Mythic Rarity. This was kind of a big deal because he's been a World Class staple for a while, but with so many World Class styles in the game, they thought it would make sense to adjust his rarity. Honestly, this downgrade makes a lot of sense because NEL Isagi has been showing up as weaker compared to other top world-class players, especially with current NEL Nagi, Seiyai, and more. Right now, he's one of the weakest world-class styles, probably on par with Don Lorenzo, who also really needs a boost. Let's talk about Don Lorenzo for a second. He's always been solid in theory, but in practice, he struggles in popularity. His moves, as you know, smooth or effective, but the main problem is players love more scoring than defending, so yay, he is not that popular. So the idea of him also getting a rework isn't surprising. A downgrade for Isagi combined with a potential rework could really balance the world-class roster and make the gameplay feel fairer. Back to NEL Isagi though, why does he need this rework more than anyone else? Well, first, his moveset hasn't changed much in a long time. His basic abilities are fine, but they're just not strong enough compared to the newer styles. When you compare him to other world-class styles, especially ones that have been buffed recently, he falls short. A lot of players think he doesn't deserve to stay in world-class without some changes, which is probably why the devs are considering downgrading him to Mythic. This could actually be good because a rework at Mythic would make him more relevant and exciting without overshadowing the current world-class roster. Now, looking at the other characters in the poll, Aiku is an interesting case. Personally, I wasn't a big fan of his last rework. It didn't feel fully complete and some of his new moves aren't as fluid as they could be. I think Aiku could use another rework. Maybe something like what they did with King. But even with that, he's not as urgent as NEL Isagi. Isagi needs the rework first because his position in the meta is kind of shaky, and the potential downgrade makes it even more important to fix his moveset and make him playable again at the level players expect. Kunigami and Hiyori were also in the poll. Kunigami is always an interesting option because his style is solid, but he's not as flashy or meta-defining as some other characters. A rework could make him more exciting, but it's not as urgent as Isagi. Hiyori, on the other hand, has some potential, but again, his gameplay hasn't been broken, just too weak. So while some players want him reworked, the majority of the community seems to be voting for Isagi first. So the situation looks like this. NEL Isagi is likely to get a rework soon, and it's mainly because he's probably going to get downgraded to Mythic Rarity. This will help balance him against other world-class styles and make him competitive again. Don Lorenzo is also weak, so he's a good candidate for a rework too. Kunigami is more of a maybe later option, and Aiku could use a second rework, but he's not as urgent. Karasu is already confirmed, so we can skip him, and Hiyori is less of a priority. Honestly, I'm going to repeat, seeing Isagi at the top of this poll makes sense. He's been one of the weakest world-class players for a while, and the downgrade just makes it more obvious that he needs attention. With a proper rework, he could regain his status and even become a fun and viable choice again for players who enjoy strategic gameplay. His moveset could be adjusted to make him more reliable in both offensive and defensive situations, and maybe even add some new abilities that fit his personality and playstyle from the manga. So, what could this rework look like? Well, we can expect improvements to his direct shot. It's like 99% that the devs are going to change it. Also, maybe adjustments to his potential new volley shot or other signature techniques, and possibly some new animations to make him feel fresher in game. But honestly, I still like the animations for NEL Isagi, but I think the current devs have a chance to do it better. The downgrade to Mythic doesn't mean he's weaker, and it just means his rarity will match his actual power in the current meta. After the rework, he could be very competitive at World Class, and maybe even feel better to use than he was when he was the meta. But hey, honestly, to people that love Don Lorenzo, his potential rework could focus on making his long-range passes and shooting more effective. Right now, he's solid in theory, but in practice, he's inconsistent. A rework could give him better follow-up moves or make his defense moves faster and more accurate. Also, they should add more defense moves, honestly, which would help him compete with other world-class styles. Aiku's situation is different. Personally, I think his current rework isn't bad, but it's not great either. He could use something similar to King's rework: smoother animations, more reliable moves, and most importantly, full support or defensive abilities. But again, he's not as urgent as Isagi. Kunigami and Hiyori are less of a priority, but a rework could still improve their overall playability. Kunigami could get more flashy combos or better synergy with teammates, while Hiyori could get moves that make him more versatile in different match types. To sum it up, this new poll shows the community clearly wants NEL Isagi reworked first. He's probably the weakest world-class style right now, and the downgrade to Mythic makes this rework even more important. Don Lorenzo also needs attention. Aiku could use a second rework, and Kunigami and Hiyori are interesting options but not urgent. Karasu is already confirmed, so we don't need to consider him. In the end, this poll is a great way to see what the community wants, and it looks like the devs are listening. NEL Isagi is at the top of the list, and if the rework goes through, we could see him become a strong and fun style again, while also balancing the world-class meta. Don Lorenzo might follow, Aiku might get a second chance, and the others will be considered later. For now, all eyes are on NEL Isagi, and I'm excited to see how the devs handle his rework and potential downgrade to Mythic. Alright, that's it for today's deep dive into the latest poll and the future of NEL Isagi. Honestly, it's really exciting to see the devs paying attention to what the community wants. We're seeing a mix of opinions, but it's clear that Isagi is the one everyone thinks needs the most love. I'm curious how they're going to handle his rework. Will they adjust his moves, improve his flow, or even add new animations that make him feel fresh and competitive again? One thing's for sure, whether you're a longtime fan of his style or just starting to use him, this rework has the potential to change a lot about how matches play out. I also think it's important to keep watching the polls for Don Lorenzo, Aiku, and others, because the community's voice really shapes the next updates. Stick around because I'll cover the full breakdown once the rework is officially revealed, and we'll analyze every move and change. It's going to be interesting to see how Isagi fits back into the meta, especially after a downgrade to Mythic. Thanks for watching, and let's see what the devs do next. It's going to be fun.